And welcome back, rugby fans, to Rugby411. As always, I'm your host. My name is Joshua Shibata, and this is my way too early predictions for the MLR 2024 season. You know, when I start dropping this video, we are so close to the beginning of the season. I am filming this the Saturday before kickoff, so exactly 1 week from today, Saturday, March 2nd, will be the start of the MLR 2024 season. I am super excited. As you can check out on my channel, I have a lot of preview videos on every team in the league this year. 12 teams, 6 on each side, Western Eastern Conference. I also have some great interview videos with members of the newly established RFCLA squad, which of course, you know, I have to root for because I am an LA boy. So that will be my team this season, which I'm super stoked about. I can't wait for their opening game on Sunday against the Dallas Jackals. But what we're talking about for this video, as I do every year, and it has come back to bite me in the ass, especially last season, but I go over as you've seen with my preview videos, I go over the new rosters of the teams, moves that have been made. I also look at the schedule that has been announced, especially, I mean, I think this is version 3.0 of the schedule after the announcement of all the new teams that are coming in and out of the league. But going over the scheduling and just my thoughts on who will win what, I've scientifically chosen my power rankings, my way too early predictions on how the teams will finish. Not how they'll do, but how they will actually finish by the time the season rolls around after week 18. And who goes into the playoffs. I don't really go into too many predictions on who will win the whole thing, though, you know, I kind of lean towards certain teams that will be favored, in my opinion. But definitely don't have a definitive there, but I do have a definitive ranking system on where teams will finish. Now, going into this, interestingly enough, as I was going through the scheduling, and I've also come up with how they'll finish win-loss record-wise, coincidentally enough, it kind of pulled into, there's 12 teams, 4-4-4. Each of the teams kind of pulled into a group of 3. So it worked out very conveniently, and we bring back the old, as everybody know, kind of a classic. It's an homage to a certain YouTube website that got me into rugby, and it pulls very nicely where you have 4 teams that are on what we would consider the top tier, and then your 4 that are in the middle that could maybe break into the top, but I still think are kind of more solidly in the pack. These 4 are kind of going to be fighting over that last playoff spot. Now, again, we don't know exactly how the playoffs system will work because that still hasn't been announced. But assuming that because we have 12 teams again this year, I'm assuming that we'll have the same playoff system as we did last time. The top 3 teams from each conference move on. The Western and Eastern Conference winners get a bye week. The second and third place conference Eastern Western teams play against each other. And then those winners will advance to the conference game championship. And then the conference winners go against, obviously, for the Shield. So yeah, so basically these 4 teams will be fighting for that 5th and 6th place into the playoffs. So that's where I kind of picked this middle ranking team. Maybe one of these teams might slide into, or more definitive, maybe fighting for the conference title at the end. But I feel these 4 will pretty solidly be in the playoff race. And then you have your lower tiers, or basically teams that I feel will struggle. And of course, we have 3 new teams. Those 3 teams kind of fit nicely into this bottom tier. But there's 3 spots out of 4. Who is that 4th team that unfortunately kind of filters down to the bottom? We will find out in just a couple of seconds. So with that being said, let's start with, of course, who, you know, is going to be the number 12 team. The new kids on the block. One of 3 new kids on the block. Your Charlotte Anthem going in at the number 12 spot. Now, of course, you can't expect too much. If you see my video previewing the Charlotte team on exactly what they are, you can't expect too much from them because it is a very unique situation. Again, not really seen throughout American sports, but this is the Charlotte Anthem is a developmental team for all intents and purposes. The roster is primarily made up of under 20-year-old players or young players that are coming out of the college system, going into pro. A lot of them, this is going to be the first time that they've ever played rugby on a professional level. And there are a few vets that are on the team, but it is primarily a developmental squad. The goal is to get them a chance. These players that a lot of them, may not have been able to start on other teams. They'd be buried on the depth chart. And this is a chance for a lot of them to get their starts, to get their reps, and just develop their skill. I think this is an awesome idea because it gives these kids a chance to really play against top international level talent because there are a lot of international players in MLR. As you might have seen in some of my videos with some of the international members of the RFCLA team, MLR is creating waves around the world. There are a lot of players that want to play in MLR from around the world, and you bringing in that international talent, the Mananus, the Makitos, you're really bringing the level of competition in MLR even higher. And these boys from Charlotte are really going to get their first-hand chance to get that international competition level without having to worry about making the Eagles team, but obviously with the goal that they will eventually be on par skill and talent wise after a couple years to make it onto the Eagles and then play in future World Cups. Of course, again, we do have the 2032 World Cup just right around the corner here in LA. In America. So super excited and stoked for that. So these Charlotte Anthem players, like I said, we're not expecting a lot from them, and we saw with Dallas last season. I feel it's very possible, and I kind of do have them going 0-16, unfortunately, this year in their debut year. Like I said, we saw it happen with Dallas before. I kind of don't think any differently with this Charlotte team, but for all intents and purposes, they are going to be the 12th place team in the league. Now, unfortunately, as much as it hurts me, but I'm just being optimistic about it. I'm just being a realist about it. Number 11 is the other new kids on the block, the Rugby Football Club LA, who will be probably number 11. Now, of course, the spot between 11, 12, and 10, it's going to be a difference of maybe a couple wins or a win. So not going to be too far from the bottom or not too far away from there. There is, of course, like I said, I had some optimism when I previewed the team. They did win a preseason game against a Utah team that just recently the Utah team smoked the San Diego Legion in a preseason game. But of course, it's preseason. You don't know what the rosters are. You don't know who's playing. You don't know how serious these teams are taking it. But there's some optimism with RFCLA. Definitely more so than Charlotte. There's a lot more talent, and I'm just being purely brutally honest on RFCLA than Charlotte. The only negative that RFCLA has comparatively to who's going to be number 10 is that RFCLA has a tougher division to play in. The scheduling is that you play every team in your conference, and for RFCLA, that's the Western Conference, twice, and you only play the opposing conference player teams once. While the Charlotte and the team that's going to be 10th, the last of the new kids on the block, the Miami Sharks, and they're only raised up to number 10 just because, again, they are in an Eastern Conference where they get to play the Charlotte Anthem twice comparatively to RFCLA that only gets to play them once. I feel that's where Miami kind of gets the edge. I also feel Miami gets the edge just because the team, I feel, had a lot more preparation time. I mean, again, this team, we knew about Miami a year out, literally a year out. Last season, we already knew Miami was a thing. We knew Miami we knew the name. We knew the Miami Sharks. We knew the first player that they drafted. We knew everything about Miami. LA and Charlotte literally came together a couple months ago. Especially Charlotte was a couple months ago. LA was at least a little bit before the winter break. But not a lot of prep time for both of these teams. And in rugby, that is so crucial. That teamwork, that cohesion of teammates. I feel Miami has a better shot of having that cohesion. Again, Miami also gets a chance to play against Charlotte twice. So that gives them at least maybe an extra win over LA. But again, I could easily see 10 and 11 switching back and forth. And especially the game between LA and Miami will be very interesting. I believe that is being played in Miami. It will be very interesting to see how that turns out between the two. That might determine who ends up 10th or 11th. But again, lower tier ranking, the bottom of the league, these three teams are definitely securely in there. I would be very, very surprised, and in the case of LA, pleasantly surprised if any of those teams happen to jump up into the mid-tier rankings. Now, question is though, who joins them in the bottom? What existing current franchise that has at least a year under their belt comes back and is near the bottom of the rankings? Unfortunately, that would be the NOLA Gold, who will be number 9 here at the bottom. NOLA, is one of those teams that always plays really hard, and it's almost, I'm not a NOLA fan, but it's almost frustrating kind of watching them because there is a lot of talent in the team, but every year they just always seem to be at the bottom end of the league in the Eastern Conference. And you look at the roster, nothing has really changed on the team. They haven't really lost a lot of players or gained any new ones. The only new one that I can really say might be a game changer for them is Ed Fido of the formerly of the New York Ironworkers, because that guy is a try-scoring machine. But other than that, a lot of the other players that are coming in, Augusto Bome and Tamiela Filimone, they're almost unknown quantities, on this team. So I just really feel, and especially in this Eastern Conference, that you have teams like Chicago and your reigning defending champions, the New England Free Jacks, who you have to play twice. That's going to be very rough for NOLA. Of course, NOLA does get the benefit of playing Miami and Charlotte twice, so they may come up over into the bottom half of the middle. And the other 4 teams that are here, definitely a couple of them might be flirting with this number 9 spot, but I really feel NOLA is going to be the team that ends up down there in the end. So that makes up the lower tier of the league. Now, moving on to the mid-tier. This will maybe surprise some people, but I really do feel, I've said this before, but I really do feel good about this team going into this season, and that is one of the former new kids on the block, the Dallas Jackals, who are going to be number 8 in the rankings here. Now, Dallas, again, from start, they really have established themselves a culture. It's an Argentinian, very rough, tough style of rugby, very much smash mouth rugby football. I feel that they have the edge over, of course, some of the other teams because that cohesion, that culture is very defined. I feel that Dallas lost quite a bit just because they are a newer team. The cohesion just is not on par with, of course, every other team that's had a couple years at least of experience ahead of them. But again, Dallas has been in some very close games, and I feel with another year of cohesion, Dallas has the chance of taking that next step. Now, how far is that next step up? Again, they only won 2 games last year. I have a great feeling that they can at least win 4 this year. That would not be out of the realm. I called the 2 games that they'll win last season, so I'm very happy about that, and I do feel confident that they will walk away with 4. Will that be enough to overshadow NOLA? We'll see. Again, as I mentioned, NOLA does have the benefit of playing Miami and Charlotte twice. That's 4 games right there that could be possible wins, comparatively to Dallas only getting to play them twice. and Dallas is in a very competitive conference where you have the San Diego, you have the Seattle, you have Houston, you have Utah. Again, as I mentioned in my preview video, I feel the Western Conference is going to be a lot more competitive than the Eastern Conference. So that's a lot of games that Dallas is really going to have to fight for. But I do feel confident that Dallas at least takes that next step forward in the competition. Joining them in the mid rankings is another Western Conference team, the Utah Warriors. Now, the Utah Warriors are always, I mean, I talk about the frustration with NOLA. I feel more frustrated watching Utah because Utah always seems to have on paper an amazing team, and yet they struggle in some games where you feel like it should be a win and they just completely fall flat. Utah has lost a few players. Yuri Van Buren is gone. Lance Williams moved back to sevens. There are some players that they are no longer going to have. And they are bringing in some good players, like Robbie Povey is a great get for them. But not a lot of changes for this Utah squad. And again, it's a Utah team that, again, with none of the changes in a very competitive Western Conference, they ended up missing out on the playoffs. Granted, by just a couple points, but they ended up missing out on the playoffs because of how competitive the league, that conference is. So again, I don't feel too much has changed with Utah. I feel a lot of other teams have improved a lot better, like San Diego, possibly Houston. So yeah, I just don't know if Utah will be able to make it into the playoffs this season, just like last season. And Dallas too. I feel Dallas is kind of knocking on the door to kind of oversee Utah. I just had Utah ahead just because Utah has at least proven that they can put things together a little bit better than Dallas. But I feel Dallas will surprise Utah. So again, those two games between Utah and Dallas will also be pretty interesting to watch. Now, the number 6 spot, Old Glory DC, the only Eastern Conference in the middle tier. Old Glory is, again, another team that, I feel on this side, they made the playoffs last season. I feel they do have a great shot at making the playoffs this season. It's just really going to be about, can they make that next step to getting past the playoffs into the conference championship? Again, Old Glory does have the benefit. They have NOLA, they have Miami, they have Charlotte. Teams that I feel pretty confident that Old Glory will beat. But can Old Glory beat New England? Can Old Glory beat a really fired up, leveled up Chicago? That's going to be the question, and I don't feel like that's going to happen. I think, especially with Old Glory losing a great player like Joaquin Tito Diaz Bonilla, that's going to hurt them a lot. They did bring in Tommaso Albani from the Eagles, an Italian player who is super, super talented. Ignacio Dotti, a really phenomenal Uruguayan player. But other than that, again, I just don't think they have the ability to take that step up against teams like New England, against teams like Chicago. Do they have the chance? Of course they have the chance. But, man, those two especially. Again, Old Glory, I feel pretty confident will make the playoffs. Will they get past that first round when they have to play against either New England or Chicago? That's going to be the question that Old Glory has to answer. And now the last team in the mid-tier range, the Houston SaberCats. Houston doing their best to upgrade, and they did, of course. I mean, a huge get for them is bringing in AJ Alatimu from Seattle to pair up with David Coutier. You have your 2 top point scorers of last season on the same team. It's phenomenal. I feel Houston has the possibility of taking that next step. The only problem with that is that the 2 teams that are ahead of them are 2 phenomenally strong teams, but there is a possibility one of those 2 teams, and I'll spoil it in just a couple seconds, one of those 2 teams may be struggling, and we might as well reveal it. It's number 4 team, Seattle Seawolves. I have Seattle up in the top tier division just because Seattle always does really, really well in the waning moments of league play, regular season play. Seattle had a rough start last season. I think they had a rough start the season prior, but it's once they get down into week 15, 16, 17, 18, the last quarter of the season, Seattle starts to become that well-run, oiled machine that is reason why they are the only two-time MLR champions in the league. And Seattle, they kind of fell apart in the playoffs against San Diego, but that's the first time. I mean, San Diego and Seattle played each other so many times in the playoffs. Seattle's usually the one that came out on top, but San Diego has taken that next step. I feel Seattle, I have them here, but man, the loss of AJ Alatimu, the loss of Jordan Chait, it's, that's going to be hard to kind of make up for Seattle. And again, Houston now has AJ Alatimu. I wouldn't be surprised. Again, the Western Conference is going to be very, very competitive, especially for that last third playoff spot in the conference. I feel that's going to be a tight race between these three teams. And there's a possibility that Utah could jump over all both Seattle and Houston. So, man, Seattle is the one team that's on the marker here that I feel, they do have a really good chance of just sliding off into mid-tier and maybe even missing the playoffs. But we'll see. We'll see. I know that we have some diehard Seattle fans watching, and I know they're screaming about that. But I do have them in the top tier level, almost certainly securing themselves a playoff spot. And then moving on to teams that I feel for sure, pretty much, I feel pretty confident that they will make it into the playoffs. Of course, you have number 3, which may surprise some people. Your reigning, defending MLR champions, the New England Free Jacks, I have as the number 3 ranked team. The reason for that, again, New England fans are probably going to think deja vu. Although last year I had New England almost near at the bottom. I think they're either 10th or 11th ranked in my way too early predictions, which is why I hate making this video, but I also love making this video. Nothing's changed with Free Jacks. They still have Jason Potros. They still have pretty much everybody from their championship winning team. But why are they number 3? Well, because of the 2 teams, and they'll spoil them right now, that are in front of them. Number 2, the Chicago Hounds. And then number 1, that of course, if you know your Major League Rugby, is the San Diego Legion. So, again, you look at the rosters of San Diego and Chicago, and you see the improvements of these 2 teams. I don't think any other teams in the league have done as much improving, restocking, reloading, whatever you want to call it, as Chicago and San Diego has. I mean, again, going over Chicago's additions, international player Nick McCarthy, Dave Kearney, international player, Adrian Carlisi, one of the better players I feel from Seattle that moved over, Nate Osberger, Nate the Great from San Diego, and then Dylan the Butcher Fawcett. I mean, Chicago has leveled up tremendously. And again, adding already to people that you already have on the team that are basically Billy Meeks, Julian Dominguez, Patty Ryan, Luke Wilson, Michael Baska. I mean, again, the only thing that kind of made me hesitate ranking them here and this high is just the fact that last year, their first year in the league, they looked on paper amazing, and they only won 3 games. But that was their very first year. Again, as I mentioned before in my preview videos about first-year teams in the league, they've almost all met disaster. Chicago only won 3. Dallas was winless. The only team that had success in their first year, and I always mention this because it makes me feel great, is the LA Guiltinis, who won their championship in their very first year. But that's very rare. I'm not expecting great things from Miami or the new LA team or Charlotte. But I feel Chicago has the potential to have a huge turnaround in year 2. Because again, you now have that cohesion, because now these players know what they're expecting of their team. You're adding in a lot of great players. Again, Chicago looks so dangerous. And then let's talk about San Diego. San Diego, I felt, was the best team going into the championship game. I mean, they're the most winningest team in the end of the league of conference play. of season, and they just ended up just really falling apart against New England. But man, San Diego brings back everybody. With the loss of Nate Osberger, that's going to hurt them a lot. But they add in international player Greg Peterson. They add in Chris Mattina from Chicago. They add in Matai Luta from Chicago. They add in Hugh Roach from Chicago. They took a lot of great Chicago players. And then you add in Makito, one of the best that's ever done it, Australian legend, going over to San Diego, adding to the players that they already have. Your Marcel Bracchi, your Mananu, your Henderson, your Justice Sears Drew, your Mikey Teo, your Isaac Ross. Again, you look on paper, San Diego, Chicago look like they've improved the most out of any of the teams. I feel they've improved so much more than what New England has done, which New England hasn't done really much. But again, can you blame them because they have a winning team already? So I just feel maybe Chicago and San Diego took that extra step, and that's why I feel in the end, you see what the rankings are. You see the teams that I know for sure are probably going to be in the playoffs. I feel in the end, it'll come down to these two in the championship game. Who's going to win that? I don't know. That I don't know. That and it's going to be kind of fun because San Diego technically, I believe the championship game is going to be played in Snapdragon Stadium this season. So San Diego gets the home field advantage, the home pitch advantage, and that is the thing in Major League Rugby. But I think that game is going to be super, super exciting. Which, again, now that I think about it, makes the games that those two will play off in the regular season super, super exciting as well. But yeah, that's our power rankings, our way, way too early prediction of how these teams will finish the season off. And again, any of this can change. Any of this can be completely off. As I mentioned before, last season I had New England ranked somewhere in the bottom, and they end up winning the Shield. It's very possible. I mean, maybe not very possible for these three newbie teams to make it. Though LA again, we did win in our first year. But there's a very possibility that NOLA could make themselves an appearance in the playoffs. Could be a very possibility that, like I said, Seattle ends up falling pretty far down with the losses that they have. And it could be very much so that one of these four teams make that second step up into the playoffs. But again, it's up for debate. And I know there's a lot of people that will debate about this. Why don't you let me know in the comments what you feel, who you feel is going to make it into the championship game? Who do you think is going to win the whole thing? Again, I'm not really into making that final selection, but these two teams, yeah, I don't know. I'm not gonna make that choice, but of these two teams, I feel these two teams are gonna make the championship game at least. But yeah, it's talking about it just makes me super, super excited. I can't wait for the season to begin. Again, it kicks off this coming weekend. Saturday, March 2nd is the beginning of the season, and of course, there are playing games Sunday, March 3rd. LA will be playing against the Dallas Jackals home opener. Watch my interview videos on my channel because they're very, very fun. Super, super excited. I'm super stoked to be part of that. Don't forget Super Brew. There's only a week left. Granted, technically with Super Brew, you can join in anytime during the season, but it's always great to start at the very beginning. The information on how to join that will be in the comments below. Again, Super Brew, absolutely free app. All you got to do is download the app. Join the league, put in my pull code so that you can join in. It's absolutely free, simple to do. Instructions will be available. All you got to do in the league is pick a team every week. All the teams that you feel are going to win. Just tell the point variance. The player with the most correct points, the correct picks, as well as the most points at the end of the regular season ends up winning a Major League Rugby t-shirt of the team of their choice, courtesy of yours truly. Again, I believe we have about 12 players in it. We had 20 last season. It was a lot of fun. I'm hoping to at least reach that this year or maybe exceed it. So, again, let me know what you think of my video. Let me know what you think about my predictions here. And I thank you, of course, as always, for your support. Thank you for watching my video, and I'll see you on the pitch.